All right, I'm gonna need it.
Okay, here, just take it with you. Okay, call the City of Ojai Building Appeals Board meeting August 1, 2017 to order. Can we get a roll call, please?
Who's going to do that?
It says roll call first.
Okay, roll call. Judy Murphy?
Here. Here.
Sheriff Fuller?
Here.
And myself, and Bob Denny is absent.
So, okay, past Chair Daddy's absent. Very good, then the Pledge of Allegiance. Would you like to lead that?
Yeah.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Very good. Do we have any public communication? I don't have any cards, so being a rather loose and formal event in any case, is there anybody out there who'd like to speak? And since there's so few folks, if anybody needs to speak at any particular time, just step up to the podium and we'll include you at that point as best we can. Okay, so the first item on the agenda is consent items. Before we get to that, I would like to agendize the next BAB meetings. Ideally 3 to 4 weeks through the month of August, if not beginning of September. Do we have any idea when we could be doing that?
How does September 7th work for everyone?
September 7th.
That's a Thursday.
Yes, a Thursday.
Thursday.
Yeah, that works. That works for me too. So we're looking at this point.
I'm sorry, are you speaking into the mic?
Gee, maybe I need to turn it on first.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are looking at agendizing the next BAB meeting for September 7th. It's a Thursday. Same time, I presume?
Yes,
6
if that
p.m.?
works for everybody.
Very good. All right, and we'll get that information to Board Member Daddy. The next item I'd like to do is, before we go to the consent items, is to, on our agenda tonight, we have one of the 5 City Council assigned tasks for the Building Appeals Board pursuant to the City Council meeting of 11 July. I'd like to agendize the other 4 items.
So for the September 7th meeting, what I would really hope to do is to get the update for Title IX. And so my reason behind that is that tonight I hope we're going to finalize my code amendments, so then I can rewrite Title IX so that everything matches, and then I can take that package to council, the amendments and the Title IX rewrite. So that's what I'd like to, if we can, work on so that we can get these code amendments adopted.
Okay, and that is one of the items.
Yes.
So, but as I said, since we only have one of them on the agenda, these were specifically council-assigned tasks. I know there were several city council persons who were involved in that. I'd like to get them on the meeting with on the next agenda, whether we address them or not. Whether we're
Okay.
able to, we at least have addressed the direction of council to do what they asked us to.
Fine, I'll add the other items to the next
Okay,
agenda.
and that's from the 716 list?
Yes.
As approved by council pending minutes adoption. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Then, next order of business is I'd like to rearrange our agenda for this evening.
I'm sorry, may I ask a question?
Yes. Speak into the microphone.
Who is taking notes?
So the meeting is being recorded,
Yeah.
and staff will come up with the minutes based on the recording.
Okay, thank you. I take my notes.
Okay. Are you going to be taking notes notwithstanding?
No.
Okay.
I'm taking my notes.
Okay. I would like to discuss the consent items, item 1 and item 2 under the consent items separately, as in not consent items per se, but at least address them separately. And I'd also like to address item number 4, since I don't think that's going to take a lot of time, before item number 3. In other words, in order of business, item 1, item 2, item 4, and item 3.
Could I just, I think that it's really important for our scheduling, if we can just make sure that we get item 3, the code amendments, done. That's my only concern about changing the order, is that for some reason we wouldn't make it through that. And that's, in order for me to rewrite Title IX, I need to have the amendments approved. That would be my only concern about moving the items around.
And we'll do that to the best of our abilities, but I think this process is going to produce the most amount of time for that, since we'll get through everything else that we need to get through, or at least I consider we need to get through. Is any objection to that from the board? Okay. All right. So having said that, consent item number 1, which actually relates to a revote, a correcting of the imperfect vote on the BAB minutes from the March 2017 meeting.
From the February 21st meeting?
Excuse me, did I say?
Yeah, February.
February 21st meeting, excuse me, which were referenced in the April 4th meeting by the inclusion of as a consent item, the minutes of the February 21 meeting. So, in any case, we're going back to that item simply because the motion did not pass because no vote on the motion was performed. So, at this point, that is the motion to approve the board meeting minutes from February 21, 2017.
From the April the 4th
The April
minutes.
one, we didn't
Yes.
approve the 21.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so since that vote was did not address all of the requirements, we're going to take another vote on it. So at this particular point, do I have a motion?
Yeah, I move that we adopt that.
I second.
Okay, do we need then, which is what we didn't do the last time, we need to take a roll call?
Okay, Member Murphy?
Yes.
Member Farmer?
Yes.
Chair Ulrich?
Yes.
And myself, yes. And
Okay. All right, then the next item is would be consent item number 2, I believe.
yes.
And that relates to the April 4, 2017 Building Appeals Board minutes. So before we take a vote on that, I'd like to discuss some of the information that was requested at that meeting and are incorporated in the minutes, as well as a couple of other details. So if we can, I'd like to start with, there's a reference in the meeting minutes to my having read aloud the state mandated standards, which went into effect by state mandate on 1 January 2017, and they are building standards adopted and are contained in certain sections of the California Building Code, the Residential Code, Plumbing Code, Mechanical Code, Electrical Code, Administrative Code, Energy Code, and the reference standards. In the minutes, it makes reference to the following was not read aloud by Chair Ulrich, but were included in the administrative report, and they're the California Green Building Standards and the California Existing Building Code. Since we didn't get a chance to review those, at least I didn't, I need, from my perspective, I did not read them, so they weren't incorporated into the official record. I do not want to include them in the minutes.
So you want that excluded.
I need that, yes, from my perspective. Do we need to take a vote on that, or is that all right? Okay, all right. Now, the next issue, the next item that came up was a request by Board Member Daddy of the building official if there was an update to the information relative to how many applications have been submitted to the city for non-conforming second units. And there was some information that was provided by the building official. However, what was asked was an update from that information, which indicated something to the effect of 45 non-conforming second units. Do you have an update?
I have an update to pass out, and we can either pass that out right now or during the discussion of the recommendations for the second dwelling compliance program, whichever you
I think it'd be swell to
prefer.
have right now. Okay, thank you.
So, let me ask a question of Renee.
Yeah, certainly, go ahead.
So, this is the activity. These are people that have applied for second units?
Correct. Under the second dwelling unit compliance program, these are the applications. If you notice on the first page, under item 9, there's a double line.
Yes.
So items 1 through 9 were applied for under the original program, which I believe was adopted in 2013, I was told,
Sounds
I believe.
right, uh-huh.
And everything from 10 below is the current program.
Were any of those approved or went through or finalized?
So if you notice under the notes column, that gives you the final dates.
Okay.
And then further over, it tells you when whether they were issued or not, and whether they were finalized or not, whether they applied, whether they're pending, kind of tells you their status.
Well, under.
And there's a summary of the numbers.
I see. Well, it looks like they were all finalized.
Well, on the,
the
the
first
earlier
page.
ones were finalized.
Uh-huh.
So it looks like if you turn to second to the last page, we've had 55 applied for, 6 are pending, 1 is approved and waiting issuance, 43 have been issued, and 38 have been finalized and legalized.
So that's good.
No appeals.
So say that again. How many have been approved?
So it's on the second to the last page. It's
Oh, I see.
38 have been finalized and legalized.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay,
The
I'm-
pending applicant, what does that mean?
It means we're waiting for a response for information from the applicant.
Renee, I have a question. For instance, number 44, Jaron Owens at 308B Lion Street. Is this 2 units that he has? I can't, or just one? 308B, is that right?
So 308B would be
Yeah.
the compliance unit that they
Okay.
applied for.
Okay. So how much time do you give them when they, I mean, is there a,
Well, currently, permits expire, or permit applications expire 20 days after initial submittal. Typically, our process is that while a applicant is in process, we're doing corrections and stuff, the plan check is active.
okay,
I don't know in particular what this is. It looks like that one, actually, the permit has been issued, and it's just pending a final inspection from Building and Safety.
okay.
Because if you look over under the issued column, it says issued.
Just.
And that would have meant that or somebody would have had to have paid obviously, their sanitation fees, right?
I'm not sure if that one was, at what point that was issued. There's no date, issuance date there.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Since it seems some of the first 38 seem to be out of sequence relative to their compliance date, their final date, or is there some reason for that?
I do not know the sorting order for this list. I didn't prepare it. I can ask staff.
It doesn't, it doesn't give things in a chronological basis, and yeah. And where, you made reference to 120 days for a permit, isn't that 180 days?
Oh, yes, you're right, 180
Yeah,
days.
that's what I thought.
Okay.
6 months.
All right, okay. And, if this has got a lot of really good information on it, but it is also, I'd characterize it
So
as
what
kind of
order
mixed
would you
up.
like it sorted in?
Well, earliest to latest.
Application date or final date?
Application date, but I'm not, but I don't see an application date.
Well, they would
here.
probably have to go back and put that in.
Yeah, I see, because that's the other part, is there isn't any, apparently any application date, so I really can't tell how the aging is going as far as the processing.
So would you would like both the application date and
That
the
would be-
final date?
that would
And
be
you would
good.
like it sorted by application date?
Yeah, just starting at the earliest and going to the most recent.
And these all have to be owner occupied? I mean, they have to live, it's deed restriction?
Correct.
So all these people live on that? Oh, I don't think so.
Under the second unit compliance program, it's my understanding that there is no deed restriction and primary residence occupancy isn't required.
I don't think so. I think it's
That's the
required.
ADU
Well,
program.
I know the ADU has, but I think also
There's
it's-
two separate programs.
Yeah,
Right.
for sure the ADU has to be. That's state. But I think
yes.
the second unit,
Well, we shouldn't be,
shouldn't be second guessing it?
no, we shouldn't be unclear on it.
I agree.
So,
So it should be right here in our guidelines, which I actually also have for you.
I'm pretty sure second unit compliance, that's what we argued about, that has to be owner occupied in one of the units, either the main or,
okay.
I think so.
The most recent?
Oh, you got the severity zone map. Thank you.
Yeah, that would-
This says that the program is operative for a limited time ending March 8, 2019. And yet, didn't the city council just have to?
City council just extended it to 19. It was expired. It expired in 2017. And city council just upped it to 2019.
But this is an old thing I got, I still got 2019.
The one I just gave you says 2019, which is, that's what it's,
It's accurate as of now.
correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't,
Can
I
I've
don't-
got something.
I see where it indicates an eligible applicant must be the owner of a qualifying property, but that doesn't indicate that they have to reside there.
That's what it said. I'm not saying that,
Well,
doesn't
okay.
say that, but
This is the program,
have you read the whole thing?
yes, several times.
You're fast.
Okay, well, I'm sort of familiar with it anyway. Okay, so, that information, we're going to then also have come back to us in the September meeting as far as another reissuance of this to get the information. Okay, and there was a question at the April 4 meeting regarding the processing time, referring to, and that referred to a past meeting, BAB meeting minutes, in which Steve McClary was, the city manager, was asked how long the city needed to process a second dwelling unit application. And the full response, or at least the full question is, was apparently I'm going to read from these minutes. The chair also asked about the processing time, referring to the minutes in which Steve McCleary, city manager, indicated that the city needed approximately 120 days. But from the video record, it said to act from the completed application. And I requested status on the duration of the current outstanding applications. The 120 days is not, my understanding is it's not supposed to be from a completed application, but from when the application is first submitted. Because that means that there could be a lot of missing stuff, and someone who's put in an application is getting sent back for additional information. That's been my experience and experience of others. So is there a guideline that makes references 120 days?
I can ask the city attorney.
Yeah, please, because I think from a program management perspective, we should know whether it's 120 days from submission of the application or 120 days from a not date certain based on when the application is completed. And that makes it from a potentially 3 months exercise into a potentially 6 or 9 month exercise. So, okay. Then, and still, once again, this is still on the subject of the second unit, second dwelling unit compliance. At the bottom of page 2 of 8 of the April 4 Building Appeals Board meeting minutes, the building official confirmed that the second unit compliance program expired March 8th, and that was 2017, and the current state law is in effect. You were not aware at that time of any applications received in the Building and Safety Department under the new law, which I presume is the accessory dwelling unit, and I don't know how this factors that. Is this like the same program? They're integrated now? Different program. So do you have any update on that?
I do not, and at this point, I don't believe the Building Appeals Board been directed by council to explore the ADU program.
Well,
And if I promised something in those minutes, it was outside of the scope, and I was mistaken.
well, that's all that the city had for second units of any type during the period, apparently from arguably because the city's law wasn't in compliance with state law until, I believe, the April 25th city council meeting when the
So this
certain
list
things were
is your
adopted.
complete list of second dwelling unit compliance program applications.
Right, but the question is, during the period of time when we had no second unit compliance program, the only program operating was state law in the city, and my question was, did anyone make an application under that program?
I do not know.
Okay, then that's essentially this same response as last meeting in April, and you also stated that the SB 1069 didn't alter the building code, and those applying to building and safety would still need to comply with planning department requirements. That sounds like it's...
The ADU program promoted by 1069 did not change Title 24 of the California building codes. It made no amendments to those codes.
Okay, and what's the implications of that?
That anything dealing with the ADU program would be under the purview of the Planning Commission, not the Building Appeals Board, because it's not a Title 24 building code change.
Well, okay. We're going to have to agree to disagree to that interpretation because the Building Appeals Board is also the Housing Appeals Board, so it relates to anything that's related to housing, especially existing housing, or the conversion of existing structures into housing. But at this point, my question was not delving into the area of accessory dwelling units as much as it was addressing the minutes from the April 4th meeting, which needed some clarification, apparently.
Correct, and like I said, I was mistaken in bringing data about accessory dwelling units to the Building Appeals Board meeting because we haven't been directed by council to discuss it, and there are no current appeals for that program for the Housing Appeals Board.
Right. Okay, well, once again, I think we're going to have to agree to disagree on that because it does relate to housing, and since we did not have a second unit compliance program in effect, certainly after March 8, and possibly because my understanding is it was in conflict with state law on the 1st of January. So until from 1st of January through the 25th of April, potentially we had nothing more than state law. You're saying at this point, I'm not trying to overdo it, but we didn't have any applications under any program.
I don't know, I can't state that.
Okay. Can we, I'd like to get that information, or unless it winds up coming out on here for the next meeting, so.
We would have to be directed by council to discuss the ADU program, which we have not been directed by council to do so yet.
Okay, so having said that, since we had an expired second unit compliance program on the 8th, we didn't have any applications for the second unit program.
I don't have the answer to that. I don't know the application dates from
That doesn't relate to ADUs,
these.
that's the second unit program.
I can find out if there were any applications for second dwelling units under the compliance program.
Okay, all right, that's it, because I don't see any here that weren't submitted earlier. Okay, then, let's see. All right, and we also asked about, this is the only, the second unit program, this one is the only program that is available at the city for someone who's coming in for any sort of a second.
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know anything about what's being promoted for the accessory dwelling unit program.
Okay.
Bill, I have some. Yeah. I found something on the, I happened to go into the city the other day, and I picked up this handout of the second dwellings, and I was looking through it, and I saw where that second paragraph on the first page, the program is operative for a limited time ending March the 8th, 2019, and after the end of this program, unpermitted second dwelling accessory will be subject to, and then it goes on. And I was looking at page 6 of 20, and it talks about timing, and I think there's just probably a typography, but it says applications must be received by the city and deemed complete owner before the termination date of the program determined by the city council to be December 21st, 2015. Shouldn't that be March the 8th, 2019? Yeah.
Okay, and then, let's see. And once again, these are from the minutes of the April 4th BAB meeting. So that was my question regarding if there's any other form or program besides this one, and you'd indicated that you would provide an answer in a future meeting.
And once again, should not have promised information that's out of the scope of what City Council has requested of the Building Appeals Board, which is anything that has to do with the ADU program we have not been tasked to deal with yet.
Okay. I'm going to say from a practical perspective, it's just information. At this point, it's been asked and you've answered. So, okay. Then we went over the informational sheet for the Building Appeals Board that goes into what is an appeal. And I would like to discuss both the in the interests of stimulating any citizens that have an issue that they would like to address before us, just the discussion regarding what an appeals costs and how long it takes to get to us.
About the second unit.
Well, this is just from the
the
minutes,
Okay.
and this was directly from the Building Appeals Board informational sheet.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so it was read into the record at that time. It pertains to this body, and it has to do with the processing of appeals. So, anybody?
So your question is, what is the cost and what's the
Well, no,
process?
the cost is $500.
Yeah,
Is that a
right.
fair amount, considering its potential for being onerous to an applicant?
Right.
Now, granted, if they're granted the appeal, they're refunded the money,
I think it's high myself.
okay?
I agree.
I agree.
And what do you, what would,
I
what do you?
agree. I think we need to make the second unit program and any other program
We should
as
make it
lenient as
affordable.
possible because of our RENA numbers, however you say that.
Exactly.
We need to have people come forward and do it.
Exactly.
Okay, so do you have any cost factor that seems a reasonable?
Well, I think that, to be fair, I mean, there are people that obviously probably would want to come forward, but they can't afford the $500 and the chance of not getting approved. So my recommendation would be $200.
It's as a reasonable fee?
Can I ask a question? Do you know what the cost to the city is? I mean, it does require time and somebody coming out, and I mean, it's not free.
It would depend on the nature of the appeal and how much staff time would be required to prepare the hearing and the
Right.
hearing officer and attend the hearing.
Yeah, there is cost involved, and
Yes.
whatever that cost is, we like to cover it, but nothing over and above that. We're not here to make a profit on people who are trying to meet the standards.
Well, I'm sure the cost exceeds $500, I would imagine, and that's more than likely where they come up with a figure of $500. I'm just
You think?
suggesting
Think it exceeds
that,
$500?
we be fair.
Would we like to make a recommendation and vote on making a recommendation to the council regarding changing that or not?
Well, is there a discussion regarding this? I mean, I'd be more than happy to make a motion.
Make the motion.
Yeah, okay. Well, I move that we change the $500 appeal fee to $200.
I second it.
Okay, well,
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
aye. Okay.
Passes.
Now, how about the period of the processing time? It's my understanding that that if someone files an appeal, that they can't really, that according to the guidelines, they should not expect to appear before this body any sooner than 40 days. Is that accurate?
Where did the 40 days come into? I just,
Preparation.
Uh-huh.
That's not referenced here. That's referenced in what the appeal process durations are on the city's ordinance.
okay. Seems funny that we had picked 40 days rather than 30 days.
Right.
Well, there's some other components to it, suffice it to say. Okay, how about, in that case, then we continue this discussion
All
to
right.
the next meeting, once we've apprised ourselves and sufficiently familiar with it that we can either have a discussion before we include it in any recommendation we make to council.
Do you want to discuss the 40 days, or are we going to
Well,
wait?
I mean, what do you think's a reasonable period?
Well, I think 30 days is reasonable. I don't know where they come up with 40 days. It seems like 30 days it would be more of a, I don't know, Judy, what do you think?
I would like to read through the
Okay.
material again
And-
before I give.
And that's probably the best way. Let's not do this on the fly.
Sure.
Okay. I'd also like to point out on page 5 of 8, about 60% of the way down the page, in the paragraph starts with Chair Ulrich, that I think that's a spelling. It should be affects, E-F-F-E-C-T, not A-F-F-E-C-T. So that's a minor correction.
I don't see,
On page 8?
Sheet 5 of 8 of the April 4 minutes.
I see it.
Okay, which takes us to page 6 of 8, where there was, Board Member Daddy made a motion with no second to request a determination between the different sections and changes as outlined in the suggested code amendments. The motion passed. So, at this point, since there was a failure of formality to second the motion, I think we need to take another vote on that.
Or make the motion.
Make a motion, make a second, and make a roll call.
Okay,
Vote.
so somebody wants to read the motion? So we know
Can I just
Sure.
comment on that? So his request was particularly when I was asking to make changes to the administrative sections of the various codes. I have dropped that as a code recommendation change.
Okay, okay, so we're,
Since we're not in that item yet, but I have dropped the recommendation to combine all the administrative code sections together, so therefore we wouldn't need that analysis.
So it's kind of a moot point.
Yes.
okay, what, I don't understand.
So originally, I was asking for us to use the administrative section that's in the building code and apply it to the plumbing, electrical, mechanical, and residential codes. And so Mr. Daddy had requested that we do a section-by-section analysis of each one of those administrative chapters to compare, to make sure we weren't making any changes that would affect something that we weren't aware would affect. And I've dropped that as a recommended code change. We'll just keep the administrative sections of each code book.
Okay, since Board Member Daddy's not present, I'd like to keep this, this aspect of it open till we can get that, that his understanding of that scenario as far as what that vote was. So I'm going to submit that we carry approval of the April 4, 2017 Building Appeals Board minutes to the next meeting in September.
Okay.
All right? Do we need to vote on that, or is that okay?
It's fine with
I think we
me.
just, okay.
All approved?
Sure, that sounds good.
All right. All right, discussion item number 4, accessory dwelling units.
Number
Okay.
3.
All right.
Accessory.
At this point, that was item number 4, and did not have, there was not accompanied by a staff report or recommendations. So is there anything new to add to it?
No, just that council requested that the Building Appeals Board come up with recommendations on how to promote the second dwelling unit compliance program.
Okay, and just make, of course, Judy.
As I understand it, you're telling us that we should be recommending this program, but not dealing with anything that came out of 1069, the ADU. I struggle with that because it seems to me that the 1069 requirements affect our second unit compliance program. So I would like to see the two put together in an informational packet to our citizens that would make them aware of the changes in the law since January 1.
And also, if I may add, or were you finished? If I may add, is it possible we could get the application forms that come, and maybe it's not completed yet, for the ADU program? Is there an application form that's been completed yet?
I have no idea, that's not,
Not in your purview.
no.
But if it's possible, when we are going through it, I would like to see the application and the checklist that goes with it, because I've had several clients of mine go to the counter here and request information, and they went away more confused than they were when they came in. And it may be because it's not worked out yet, I understand. So I've told them to be patient, that we're working on it. As far as a way to get this out there, wouldn't a well-written story in the Ojai Valley News, I mean, a lot of people do read that, maybe even in the Star, everybody seems to read that as well, explaining it in the simplest terms as possible. I wish Bill Warner could write it, and he would do well. Explaining what it's like and how to go about it, and that it's coming, and explaining the deed restriction that definitely does go with that. I don't see that anywhere in the second unit program that you said, but I know that it did say a deed restriction, the owner had to live on the property. I had to speak to it at a city council meeting, this is about a year or two ago. So I don't know if it's been removed, but it was definitely part of the second unit program. But anyway, something in the paper that would explain it, I think would be the best way to get it out.
Okay, I have, is the second dwelling unit / accessory unit compliance with non-conforming in lowercase, close parentheses, program, one program, two programs, or three programs?
My understanding, it's one program. It's the second unit compliance program
Okay.
for the non-conforming structures. That was worded exactly from the item that was approved at council.
Right, but it's not consistent with what the ordinance is in the city municipal code, which says,
Like I
it
said,
calls
that
it
was the
second
exact direction from council on the approved list, was that item worded that way.
So it's all one program. ADU second unit is one program.
No, there are two separate programs.
This isn't.
This request from council was for the non-conforming second dwelling unit compliance program.
Did you get a chance to discuss it with anybody? Because I don't see anything with those words.
I discussed it with the city manager. We looked at the punctuation of that sentence, with it being in parentheses, non-conforming, that's what they were specifically looking for, was the second dwelling unit compliance program.
Wouldn't it be easier just to call it the second dwelling accessory or compliance program rather than throwing in they know they're non-conforming.
You want to make that a recommendation to change the program language?
Yeah, second dwelling compliance program, or, they already know that they're non-conforming, or they wouldn't be in filling out the
I believe
application.
these guidelines don't use non-conforming in the title, but
No, they
the
don't.
wording on this item came directly from the wording on the item from council.
Yeah, I understand.
That's why it said non-compliance.
Right. Then I'm going to, at this point, since there's sufficient, I have confusion.
Join the club.
Excuse me?
Join the club.
I think we need some further clarification from council, or at least perhaps the council liaison who was there. Could you clarify this for us?
Putting him on the spot.
Or maybe give us your feelings, Randy, on
Just the fact that accessory unit is used in that is probably adding to the confusion.
All I'm going to speak to is what was written and what was followed, and that's what you have. And now I'll speak to the confusion that may be the parentheses of non-conforming, because maybe an applicant, as much as we'd like to think they know it's non-conforming, might not know what non-conforming is in our ordinances. So I can see why it's there, and I can also understand the confusion with it. I don't think it's any, you can ask for it to be sent back through Renee to council or to the city manager to get a clarification, but I don't think you're going to get any more than that was what was discussed at council. That was the verbiage that was used at council, and therefore that's what's repeated. Now, you can ask that, I believe that if there is conflict in the verbiage, that we review it and come back with one phrase that fits what the needs of the program are. I would agree with that 100%.
Yeah.
Randy, has the council addressed in any way, shape, or form the ADU 1096 law? I mean, do you see that as something that will turn into a program that our city will offer?
Well, it's not necessarily an offer as much as it's a program
just
that
law.
allows the citizens to actually apply for a permit to build an ADU. So to me, they're two separate entities. One is new construction and one is an existing construction. So that's why they're two separate packages. If you can't combine the two, they're not the same.
Okay.
Okay?
The ADU is for new construction only.
No. it's not.
I don't think so.
No,
And the
it's not.
second unit is, yeah, well, okay, let me just come to this point. There is not the term non-conforming in the city ordinance 10-2.1709,
And-
second residential units.
And I would agree if that's what it is, it should be stated clearly what it is. And if non-conforming is not in it, then I
Yeah.
would agree with you. Let's
Yeah,
remove non-conforming.
Yeah, it's
Well,
not even on the app,
it-
it's not even on the form
That's-
that goes to the.
I'm not opposed to that. I would, again, I would bring it back to Renee and have Renee run it back to the city manager
And neither
and
re-
bring it to council for a clarification and
Yeah.
a reiteration of that.
And neither is accessory. So at this point, if we're referencing the second residential unit program and that particular second residential unit section of the ordinance, this seems to be like it's kind of spread out into more than one.
I think what I'd like to see is if we're handing this handout, that it
Clarify
matches
it?
what our ordinance is.
Right.
So that so it's not ambiguous.
All right.
That's what I would agree to.
Real
Okay,
simple.
well, in that case, then, I'm going to suggest that we do some research, we do some review, and of section 10.2.1709, and in conjunction with the second dwelling, accessory dwelling unit compliance program, which also has language in it that it doesn't follow the actual ordinance, but maybe there's a reason for that, because it makes reference to city council resolutions and a city council ordinance adoption, and we kind of could perhaps make some recommendations to council about how that can be clarified.
Good.
Okay, so that will be something we'll add to next
Okay.
agenda for the September meeting. Okay, which brings us to discussion item 3, which are amendments to the 2016 building code.
Can we go back 1 second? So I'm a little unclear.
By the way, is there anybody need to, Steve? Yes? Sorry.
Okay.
He was waving.
Good evening, Chair and board members. Steve Quillisi. I am on the Planning Commission, but I'm speaking today as a private citizen who has read SB 1069, the new SB 35 for this year, the old SB 35 from the previous session, etc. The Legislative Council's digest of SB 1069 says, this bill, this is SB 1069 now, will replace the term second unit with the term accessory dwelling unit throughout the law. Okay, so that's one of the things that has to be fixed in the code, okay? But what hasn't changed is the BAB's concern with building codes and the Planning Commission's concern with zoning and land use. And I think this is why we can now talk about two separate programs. There is what used to be called, or maybe is still called, the second unit program. It should now, by state law, be called the ADU program. The second unit compliance program is separate. I think we all agree to that. And it should now be referred to, according to the state law, as the accessory dwelling unit compliance program. And I think if you go through Title IX and Title X and keep that principle in mind, that's the first thing we have to do. Now, there's some confusion about the ADU program, because it gives individual property owners a lot more leeway in creating second units and not having to jump through as many hoops with regard to parking, with regard to density, a lot of other things. Okay. I was asked by another citizen about the wording of the ordinance, and the Planning Commission has already referred to City Council, recommended to City Council changes to 10-2-1709. And it did not appear at first reading to include anything in a second unit or accessory dwelling unit compliance program. That is a separate program, okay? But once you have a legal non-conforming second unit, or now called a legal non-conforming ADU, I believe that the recommendation of the revisions to 10-2-1709 from the Planning Commission will show that there is a way to get to an ADU under the ADU program, because there's a table in what the Planning Commission recommended that talks about conversion of an existing legal unit. Okay, if you have been through the, call it what you want, compliance program, and you're approved, you now have a non-conforming but legal existing structure. And then if you want, my reading as a public citizen right now, is that once you have a legal existing structure, conforming or non-conforming, then through the state's ADU program, you have certain rights to convert that legal existing building into a regular ADU. That's how I read it, and I believe that's how the Planning Commission read it. And if you get the minutes from the Planning Commission meeting, you'll see there's a table in there with about 6 columns that talk about a new ADU, a converted existing structure, a converted legal existing structure, building a second story on an existing legal garage. There are several different things in there, and I would recommend that to you. Take a look at the minutes of the Planning Commission meeting.
May I ask you a question?
Yes, ma'am.
So if you have an existing garage, it's just plain old garage, and you want to turn that into an ADU, you can do that.
That is under the state's ADU program. You can
Right.
convert an existing legal building.
Dwelling, yeah, it's legal. Mhm.
It's not even a dwelling at this point if
a
it's not
dwelling, but
habitable.
It's just a building, yeah.
It's just an existing legal structure,
As long as the structure is legal.
as long as the
conforming.
structure is legal.
If it's
One
non-
way to make the structure legal is to go through the compliance
Right.
program.
Yeah, if it's non-conforming, my understanding is that
Conforming, non-conforming, and legal, illegal are two different axes.
that non-conforming would cloud the title too, am I not right?
That I couldn't say. I'd say that's a question maybe for the
Seemed to
city
me
attorney,
that-
I'm not sure.
Yeah, it seemed to me
But-
that that would cloud the title for somebody that had a
deed
legal
restriction.
non-conforming.
Well,
Legal non-conforming for for instance, on a title policy or whatever. I don't know.
I don't know. Once it's a legal structure,
But if it was legal.
I'm not sure that conforming or non-conforming
Yeah, I think
has a lot of meaning, because the building standards change year by year. And so anything that was built in the past is likely to be non-conforming in some fashion, even if it was legal conforming when it was constructed.
Okay.
But I'm not sure if there's any deed restrictions that go with that.
Well,
I
with
do think the
ADU
deed restriction with owner occupied
Yeah, that's,
is in there.
yeah, that is in there.
I want to compliment you on the somewhat oblique reference to geometry.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you. I hope that helps.
It helps.
I still am in a state of confusion.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I got,
Okay.
Chair, can I have one more thing to that?
Yes, yeah.
I just wanted to make sure that I was clear. I just wanted to correct myself when you said new construction versus, after listening to what Steve said, I wanted to add to that also garage conversions are also a part of the ADU program.
Right.
So that was one thing that we did leave out.
Okay.
But only garage conversions.
Well,
Okay, so,
okay, so, correct me if I'm wrong. So we want to ask council for clearer wording on their direction for this item, correct? Because we weren't sure whether it applied to the new ADU program or the old second unit compliance program, or both.
there's language in that that doesn't relate to the second unit compliance program.
Wait, I think I have two items. One is you want clarification on this, correct? And second is you want clarification in here because there's now language that doesn't
That
match.
doesn't relate to our ordinance. It's not consistent with it.
This language isn't consistent with the ordinance for the second dwelling unit compliance. So there's
that controls
two things,
the
not
second
one.
that controls second residential units.
Not, okay, I'm gonna, second units under the compliance program or the ordinance for the new ADUs?
Okay, at this point, the terms accessory dwelling units were inserted within parentheses
In here, under the item?
in the former second dwelling unit compliance guidelines. Our ordinance
I see it.
only addresses second residential units. That's kind of,
Okay.
there's three different things
So
going on here.
it's this right here, correct?
Well, starting with the all caps in the first line. Second dwelling.
see it.
And then, yeah.
Okay,
Under
And then everywhere
general
else where it
description.
makes reference to it, it has the same thing. So
so
We're looking at
the question
congruence.
is, do we have to change that now?
Well, that could be one of our recommendations, but at this particular point, starting with this, the direction from council, I think we would like to have either from the city manager or from council, some specific direction of what it is that we are reviewing.
And making recommendations
discussing
for.
And making a recommendation on.
Okay.
Okay, so we ready to go to item number 3? Which has an administrative report appended to it, and it relates to the proposed amendments to the 2016 California Building Codes, which were adopted by operation of law on January 1, 2017. And these are amendments to it. So, open the discussion.
Right.
So what I did for clarification was, we discussed these at the April meeting, and I incorporated your comments in the new set of items that you see, and where I made changes, I highlighted it in yellow.
Oh, okay.
I have a question. Under the administrative report, Renee, dated June the 28th, the back of the page, 1 of 2, item number 4, it's just, if you can help me understand that. If a person adds a new roof, okay, let's say it's over 10%, let's say they have a leak, and they have to have it, it's repaired, and it's over 10% of the overall roof, does that mean they have to go back and re-roof the whole part of the structure?
Correct. That was a suggestion from the last meeting, that they wanted to, there is currently no threshold for repair and when it would trigger you having to go back and re-roof the entire structure. And one of the things that we're doing is we're increasing the minimum fire rating classification of roofing for the city of Ojai to A, which is the highest fire classification. And in this way, if someone has to repair, more than 10% of their roof, they would be required
To
to
re-roof.
re-roof with the upgraded fire retardant.
So that's my
roofing.
understanding. If, let's say, you know, have a house of 4,000 square foot roof, okay, and you have a leak and it's over 10%, that leak repair is over 10%. The person would have to go back and re-roof regardless of the shape of the old roof. You could have just had a new roof put on and you would have to go back and re-roof.
Correct, and you'd have to upgrade it to Class A.
Wow, okay.
So, you know, what's interesting to me is that that doesn't hold true for the historic landmarks. So we can let those guys burn down because, you know, they're just historic. I mean, I understand the idea of keeping the roof looking the same, but that seems kind of strange to me.
Once again, it was a Building Appeals Board recommendation that I just included.
Okay, thank you.
Wasn't it that we didn't have the right to tell the
I
historic
think
building?
that's probably true. We would like to have made them do the whole roof.
I have a question, if that's in order. Page 4 of 12. The top column on the right, it says raising to Class B. Is that just a typo?
Yes. That's a
Typo.
typo, it should say Class A.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Second, the third row, center column, could you tell me how that's different from the column, from the,
So if someone comes in for a roof replacement, they're already replacing their entire roof. So if someone comes in for a roof replacement
Okay.
permit, they're replacing their entire roof, and that section is actually a code section currently in the code. So the first column, you have the actual code language from the current adopted code, and on the second column, you have my proposed Ojai language, where requiring a minimum Class A if you come in to replace your roof. There is currently no requirement in the code if you have a repair to upgrade your roof. So based on the comments, I added this section below it. So this is the entire roof covering of every existing structure or more than 10% of the total roof area is repaired. So that section is specifically for repair. The one above it is if you were planning already on replacing your entire roof.
okay.
So if it's detached second unit, repair 10%, it wouldn't require re-roofing the other structure, right?
No.
But if it's attached,
Yes.
if it's an attached second unit,
That's good to know.
then that would kick in the repair of the other.
Correct. It's each individual structure that you would require a roof
Okay.
permit for.
This was apparently in the old code where it's defined as a one-year period. But I'm just wondering how that works. What if a person has a branch fall on the roof and, you know, that might be April and, you know, where I'm going with this.
Correct.
How do you decide how to define the year and when to turn that clock on and so forth?
So the wording is within any one-year period. So the clock starts the second you come in and get some kind of roof repair permit,
Okay?
even if it's August 1st. So you would have until July 31st to not pull permits for more than 10% of the repair. But August 1st, you came in again, your 1 year has expired. So technically, you could repair 9% again.
Okay.
Is that clear?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
You have any questions?
I got a lot of questions, but
Okay.
no.
Well, let's address then page 2 of 2, since that has, I believe those are recommendations. You indicated then that item number 1 has been addressed, as in the administrative section. What's that section?
So, in each code, there is an administrative section, and my original proposal was to use the California Building Code administrative section for all administrative sections in every code. and I withdraw that.
This will just be maintaining the
Current code
current
administrative
code with
sections.
administrative sections in each individual code section as adopted by law on the 1st.
Correct.
January. Okay. Item number 2, reinspection fees will be required to be paid prior to final inspection or occupancy. Now, this is page 3 of 12, center column on the lower item, reinspection fees. And one of the basis for imposition of reinspection fees is failure to provide access on the date for which the inspection is requested. What's an example of a failure to provide access?
Someone requests a furnace inspection in their roof, and there's, you get into the attic, and there's no ladder provided for the building inspector to get on into the attic for the inspection.
The building inspector doesn't have a ladder?
Building inspectors do not carry ladders.
Well, they should.
No building inspector
they
in
should.
any jurisdiction that I know of carries
We need to
ladders.
change that.
So it's up to the person to
It's
provide
up
the
to-
ladder for
to
the building inspector?
Yes, it's up to the, and depending on which code and which chapter you're reading, some say it's up to the permit applicant, and some say it's up to the contractor to provide access for the building inspector to perform the inspection. It's in the code.
Wow.
Um,
They already spent $500 for the appeal, now they have to provide a ladder?
Someone got up into that attic to replace that furnace. There was a ladder there at one point.
Yeah, but that was a replacement company. That wasn't the
Well,
owner.
and so those companies should be providing the ladder.
They're supposed to leave a ladder there? A friend of mine just had her air conditioning complaint. They didn't leave a ladder.
When they call for inspection, they should come and provide a ladder for the building inspector. The contractor absolutely should do that.
She didn't know that.
Randy?
So, okay,
Randy has a question.
yes.
I just have one. I probably shouldn't be addressing this. This is for you guys to do, but I have a couple concerns on this. I provide a ladder, a building inspector steps on it and falls through and injures
right.
himself. Who's liable?
That's what happened to my friend.
That would be my first concern. The second concern is how would a consumer, maybe a contractor might, but how would a consumer know that they're required to do that? And on the first inspection, if they don't have it, obviously they would be informed. But I'm just talking about prior to.
I think in all the jurisdictions that I have worked in, if someone doesn't have access for an inspection on the first inspection, you write them a correction and say, provide access. What we're trying to get to are the people where you've gone 3 and 4 times out there, and there's no access.
Well, I just, for the general knowledge, I did provide a friend a ladder.
Yes, you did. Thank you.
And the inspector did fall through
And he fell through the ladder.
the ladder. So therefore, I will no longer provide ladders to friends in the city of Ojai.
Thank you, Randy.
Something you want to say?
So there is a paragraph in here. It says, this section is not to be interpreted as requiring reinspection fees the first time a job is rejected for failure to comply with the requirements of the technical codes, but as a method of controlling the practice of calling inspections before the job is ready for such inspection or reinspection.
This appears to have 2 hammers, to mix a metaphor. One is a reinspection fee, and 2 is a withholding of the final inspection or occupancy approval. And that's, well, I can understand it onerous if somebody's missing appointments, not providing access, and wasting the inspector's time. That's also a pretty onerous restriction. How often does this happen? After 2 or 3 times?
It can happen. It does happen, although I have to admit that I believe in the 20 years I've been doing building inspection, we have only assessed this fee maybe a handful of times.
And I think they're usually notified in advance that they have to have a ladder.
Well, at least on the next go-round.
And before we ever assessed a reinspection fee, we would write the correction notice, please provide access, or the next time an inspector comes here and there is no access, a reinspection fee may apply. So we give them a warning beforehand.
I've seen that for years, so at this point, I don't know how much this needs to be codified when there is a methodology for effectively doing the same thing.
We can't impose a reinspection fee unless it's codified. There's nothing in our code that says that we could apply a reinspection fee.
Okay.
So
And
that's
okay
why we're
with
adding that.
And I'm okay with the application of a reinspection fee, but not with holding up a final. That seems to be over what is a matter of time.
The
and
previous
cost.
proposal I had said was no further inspections until the reinspection fee was paid, and so the board's comment was change that to final.
And that was, in the minutes?
No, it would have been on the prior attachment to the packet. I don't think the minutes detailed every change. I don't believe they did.
Okay, I don't recall that.
But I do know that I did originally say prior to the next inspection, they had to pay the fee, and the discussion was that they felt that progress shouldn't be inhibited on the project holding up an inspection, so perhaps we could require the fees before final. I mean, otherwise, how are you going to collect the fees? If you don't put some deadline, you just final the building and the fees stay outstanding?
Well, it's like when someone has a city building, a city license. If they don't pay the fee, they don't have a license. If there's some benefit that they're supposed to have. Now, you're saying that once it's finalized, there's no way of billing someone and expecting them to pay the bill. And that's probably not a significant bill, but by the same token, the next time they want to do business with the city, I'm sure it would come up.
Well, fees are attached to a property and a permit, so if they didn't come in for that particular property, I mean, once the permit is finalized, it's finalized.
And that would be something where Sherry would have it in her office in there in the file, right? Is that right?
The final permit, yes.
Yeah, okay.
The permits are finalized and filed by property address.
I just see this as being a big issue at the one time it gets applied. So, I'm not really willing to support that portion of it. I don't have a problem with reinspection fees. I don't have a problem with the imposition of reinspection fees, because this also, if you note on the bottom of the third paragraph, or for deviating from plans requiring the approval of the building official. So that means the deviations would require the approval of the building official.
Correct. So you're building a building, and for whatever reason, you decide you want to make an opening larger than is on the approved set of plans. We request that you submit an if it was engineered, an engineering change for that, and it doesn't, and we keep going and we keep going and we keep going, and you never provide that, then that's deviating from the approved set of plans.
Okay.
Okay, but there would be a reinspection fee for that, or for going back and once they finally provided it?
Only if they called us out continuously to review the item and they never provided the updated plans.
Okay.
And to make sure, I just want to understand this ladder thing again. So if the inspector went out initially, if you went out initially and had to inspect the attic or whatever, and the homeowner did not provide a ladder, obviously you wouldn't have one, or you wouldn't go up there. So they would.
We
you'd come
would
back
write a
again,
correction notice and we'd say, please provide a ladder for access.
And then you would charge them a reinspection fee?
No. If you read this, it says, this section is not interpreted as requiring reinspection fees for the first time a job is rejected.
Oh, for the first time, okay.
Okay.
I don't have a problem with that last paragraph. I think that you do have to have a bit of a hammer for that rare person that's
Yeah.
just not following the schedule.
What are the reinspection fees? Is that based upon the cost, Renee, or?
I think I talked to the finance director about it, and I believe there is one specified, I think.
Do you have any idea, just,
Reinspection fees are usually by an hourly cost.
oh, okay.
So, 1 hour inspection fee or a half an hour inspection fee, if it's a furnace, it's half an hour at the most to drive out there, climb up on the ladder, do the inspection, and come back.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
At this point, is there any further discussion on it?
Not for me.
Usually.
It seems sensible.
Do we want to take a vote on this to see where we're at?
Yeah.
We don't. I'm just, at this point,
We can take a vote. but I
okay,
don't
well,
know.
or we can
Can we move
address
on?
it, we can move on and address it later.
Yeah, I don't know what's
do
best,
that.
whether you want to do it item by item.
No,
or-
I don't think so.
Okay.
I just, there's, I think we've addressed page 4. Let me ask regarding the fourth item from the top, CBC 1803.1. This is page 4 of 12, geotechnical investigations.
Page 4?
Yes.
Down at the bottom.
Okay.
Oh, I see it.
So this expands or narrows, as the case may be, depending upon one's perspective. The current adopted state language is the geotechnical investigation shall be conducted by a registered design professional.
Correct.
And the proposed Ojai language is,
A California licensed engineer experienced in soil engineering.
okay, besides a soils engineer, could that be a civil engineer?
If we choose to make it that way.
Well, okay, the way this is,
This is worded specifically to require for geotechnical investigations to have a California licensed engineer experienced in soil engineering. Civil engineers have a more broader scope. This is narrowing it down specifically.
right, and we could require a geotechnical investigation for pretty much any foundation, any footing excavation, correct?
Yeah, the code language is pretty broad. I mean, the building official could if they wanted to.
Yeah.
We pretty much leave that for sloping hillsides, retaining walls, things like that. If you come in for a standard addition on a flat lot, we don't ask for geotechnical investigation.
Yeah, but this would allow for that. This doesn't,
The current code allows for it.
right.
The only difference that I'm proposing is that we limit it to California licensed professional, specifically with experience in soils engineering.
So it's basically your call, really?
It is.
And you're just saying that it should be licensed? in
Licensed in California. With our seismic issues in California, I would feel better having someone knowledgeable about California soils.
That's familiar with, yeah, okay.
Okay.
Item 1809.4, next item, depth and width of footings.
I thought about this. We discussed this at the last meeting. And in talking to various jurisdictions within the county, including the county of Ventura, they really feel that for our soils classification, particularly in the city of Ojai, a minimum 27-inch deep footing serves the building the best. And if the board really has a problem with that, then this would be one of those items that I would agree to disagree and bring it to council and change. But I really feel strongly that we build safer buildings with the 27-inch deep footings. It's been a standard for years and years and years. I do have to say most of the plans that I see here, people are already providing that. But without putting in the code, somebody certainly could build a building with a 12-inch deep footing.
And
Randy has a question.
Yes. Do you have a question?
I just have one question. That goes back to the requirement of having a California certified soils engineer. So if I'm constructing a room addition, and my engineer has a soils report, and he says that I can get away with a 12-inch footing, that's going to supersede your 27-inch requirement, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, the 27-inch deep is a prescriptive footing, but if you hired a licensed soils engineer, they can recommend less deep footings. They can always do that.
But only on an extension of a house, not on the main structure?
Oh, no, it could be an entire house.
How do they get away with that?
Because they analyze the soil and can tell what the soil can handle, as opposed to if you don't analyze the soil, we go with the safest.
I see. Okay.
That's probably what.
That makes sense.
You know, if you're building a large structure and the soils engineer can change your footing depth from 27 inches deep to 15 inches deep, the amount of concrete you would save would certainly pay for the report by the soils engineer. But if you're doing a simple small addition, the amount of cost isn't going to come close to paying for a report from a soils engineer.
I see.
Okay, page 5 of 12, time limit of application at the bottom, CRC R105.3. An application for a permit for any proposed work shall be deemed to have been abandoned 180 days after the date of filing.
So let me clarify, this section is for the California Residential Code, administrative section. There is similar language on page 1 for the California Building Code. So because I eliminated combining the administrative sections, then any change that we made in the California Building Code administrative section, I had to carry forward into the other administrative code sections. So the language of this is the same as the one that would be in the building code, the plumbing code, the mechanical code, and the electrical code.
What is the definition of justifiable cause?
I don't believe there is a definition in the code under definitions.
Then how about we strike justifiable cause?
So just any request?
And, well, the extension must be requested in writing.
In writing, period.
Okay.
And the application may not be extended if applicable provisions of this code or any other pertinent laws have been amended subsequent to the date of application. In order to renew action on an application after expiration, applicant must submit plans and pay a new plan review fee.
So if you submitted an application for an addition and you got it extended and the application expired and we had a code change, we would ask you to resubmit to the current code requirements.
Right, that's the latter part, the second sentence. The first sentence seems to indicate that any application may not be extended if the applicable provisions of this code or any other pertinent laws have been amended subsequent to the date of the application. That's the application for extension.
That's the building permit application.
Initial building permit application.
The code often refers to the permit as the application for the permit.
Right.
So an application for a permit may not be extended if applicable provisions, laws, or any other pertinent laws have
Any
been
other
amended.
pertinent laws have been amended subsequent to the date of the application. That sounds like there'd be a retroactive proponent here that,
I think the wording is if the code had some kind of substantial changes that affect the safety of buildings, we could ask them to retrofit for. So for instance, in the Northridge earthquake, they discovered some serious flaws in the way that buildings were built. And if you had an application in that went past its time, you could ask them to upgrade the plans to safer code.
and I'm sure under that set of circumstances, almost everyone would agree to that for a variety of reasons. This is vague, though, as far as what any other pertinent laws, et cetera. I'd like to, from my perspective, I think it does everything it needs to do without that sentence.
Without that first sentence?
Without that first sentence.
Okay.
And leave the second sentence. In order to renew action on an application after expiration, applicant must resubmit plans and pay a new plan review fee. So,
Okay.
all right?
Yep. So just for your knowledge, I am also changing all the sections that have the same language. So in the building code, the residential code, anywhere we have that, I'll make that change.
Okay. Okay, expiration. CRC R105.5. Every permit, the existing current state adopted language is every permit issued shall become invalid unless the work on the site authorized by such permit is commenced within 180 days after its issuance, or if the work authorized on the site by such permit is suspended or abandoned for a period of 180 days after the time the work is commenced. The building official is authorized to grant in writing one or more extensions of time for periods not more than 180 days each. The extension shall be requested in writing and justifiable cause demonstrated. So there's that expression again, but that's in a current state law. So how effectively does the proposed Ojai language?
So in the current state
Change
law,
that.
it says one or more extensions of time. We're saying one extension. Two extensions?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, works on it.
Two extensions. It's
Two
the
extensions.
second paragraph toward the bottom.
Correct, two extensions. So we're limiting it to,
Okay, I've got
A year.
the same thing. I would just take out justifiable cause as being vague, notwithstanding it's being in the current state adopted language. I don't have a problem with it otherwise. Just that extension must be requested in writing.
okay.
And then after that, a permit may not be extended, I think needs to be struck because we deleted it from the previous.
Correct.
Okay. Refunds. It's nice to have refunds. It's nice to have a refund policy. How did this expand from state law, which says you're authorized to establish a refund policy?
Well, I think this gives the building official the entire responsibility for coming up with a refund policy, and I would prefer to have it standardized and codified as a refund policy.
As in, no more than 80%?
Correct.
Okay.
Because there is staff time involved in processing the application and filing the application and taking,
Is that pretty standard, Renee? I mean,
Yes.
yeah,
yeah.
is it okay?
That seems reasonable.
Okay, that's all right. Then CRC R108.6, work commencing before permit issuance. Okay, is there a recommended fee, or is it, who's going to come up with that fee?
So the fee amount that I recommend is, before obtaining the necessary permits, shall be subject to a fee equal to the permit fee, and that's pretty typical too. And that doesn't include all of the other city fees, it's just the actual permit fee. So if your air conditioning permit cost you $20 and there was a $49 issuance fee and there was plan, archive, and blah, it would only apply to the $20, because that's the permit fee.
can see this happening with someone who's got a little heavier fee than just an air conditioning fee, though.
Absolutely.
So that could mean several $100s.
So it's basically penalizing the person because they've started work without a permit, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. We have any thoughts on that?
It seems reasonable. I mean, I guess.
Okay, well, it effectively, okay, so, okay, all right. Next one, CRCR 108.
So that's the same language that we had corrected in the
Yes.
building code section, and I will make those corrections in that.
That's reinspection fees, so, okay.
The next page, on page 9 at the bottom, that's bringing over into the California Residential Code the re-roofing that we added to the California Building Code.
Yeah, and the changes for the triggering percentages in 902.1.1, okay?
Question?
Right, so we're on page 10 now,
Okay.
10 of 12.
Yeah, I have a question. I'm still, so on page 9 of 12, the current state code of the re-roofing, if I understand, is 50%.
Correct, there was a percentage in the California Residential Code, but there was no percentage in the California Building Code.
Oh, okay.
So I just brought forward the 10% from the building code into the residential code.
Okay,
They don't have to be the same if you would like the threshold to be different. The California Residential Code deals with 1 and 2 single-family dwellings and townhomes that are 3 stories. So the building code now applies more to your larger commercial-type buildings, and the California Residential Code is specifically for residential. So if you would like them to be different, you can do that.
I don't think it justifies being made different. There's not that much
No, no,
commercial at this point that would not be benefit from it, and a lot of commercial is more prone to, well, not necessarily it being downtown, Lord help us if that's the case, but at least you have congruity in the, everything's the same.
Right.
We have any thoughts on that or any feelings on it? Okay. Okay, so, now we're down to fee refunds, CMC 104.5.3 and CPC 104.5.
Right, so that's the California Mechanical Code and the California Plumbing Code. And once again, I will make the changes that we made
80%,
the other.
okay. And then, okay, 11 of 12, this first item, CMC 105.26 and CPC, same thing, Mechanical Code and Plumbing Code. And
Okay, make
we
the
need
same
to
changes.
Make the same changes and have everything congruent that way.
Yep.
And that is that, from that perspective. Do you have any questions about the tables? Which is the 27-inch deep footing. Okay, if you don't, then it'll become, it sure has a lot of 14, okay, right, I think that takes care of that. And do you, from a practical perspective, do we need to, you want to bring that back and then we'll vote on it at the next meeting?
Do you need me to bring it back? Do you trust me to make your changes? And then I can bring it to council? I'm not going to bring it into council until I've had a chance to rewrite Title IX, because the changes that we made in here need to be reflected in Title IX. So I won't be bringing it to council until we've gone through that rewrite. So I can bring it back if you would like.
I I think from a procedural basis, I prefer to do that. That way we're
Okay.
proving it
Moving
and
forward.
and moving it along with no doubt. I don't think there's any, at this point, there isn't a big rush to get it before council. And we've addressed that item tonight, so.
You're saying she should bring
I
it back?
would like to bring it back for
Oh,
a
you wanna
vote,
bring it back?
yes.
I'll bring it back.
Could, Renee, would you look at page 10 of 12, the second row? I don't remember the history of this one and why it got deleted. We don't have any moderate fire hazard zones, but we probably should.
The areas designated as moderate fire hazard severity zones would not have to roof cover with Class A material.
Okay, and since we've said
So
all
we've
of
said
Class
everything
A.
needs to be, I had to
Got it.
delete the exception.
Yeah, that
it.
expands it
Thank
for
you.
the entire community. Okay. Is there anything anyone would like to add? Any comments?
Yes, I would, may I, are you talking to the audience?
Well, no, go ahead.
Are we going to look at a fire map that's been
That is one of the-
looming for some time?
That is one of the items that council has directed us to look at.
That's number one on here.
Number one?
Uh-huh. Okay, so we're
Okay.
going to be looking at that.
Yeah. Okay. In that case, any comments from the, yes? Please.
Thank you again, Steve Quillisi. The process you're going through here right now is one that is taken up by the Planning Commission a lot. We see code changes, we see tables modified, that sort of thing. And once the commission, or in your case, the board, has told staff, make these specific changes, then it's probably useful for one or another of you to review that when it's done. But in my experience, it works just fine if a motion to recommend is to recommend what's in the package as amended by the discussion during this meeting and direction to staff. Then you don't have to all look at it again, and you don't have to vote on it again.
And
It's up to you.
Essence of time, too, you're moving things along.
Right, that makes sense.
True.
Right, I agree.
So does someone want to make that motion?
You have a question?
Yes?
My name's Dan McLaughlin. I'm a retired building official and building inspector for 38 years, and everything Renee has told you is right on. The ladder issue, I can't tell you how many contractors do their job and they give the owner a letter saying you're responsible to call in the inspection. So the contractor calls the inspection, never tells the homeowner, the inspector goes out, doors are locked. And I work in a jurisdiction currently where we don't have a reinspection fee, and we go out 5 or 6 times for a furnace or a water heater. And those are the main ones that we run into. It's very seldom that you run into that in other trades, like a new house or a room addition. In your soils issue, I work in a jurisdiction currently where we give the owner or the developer an option, soils report, or you use 4,500 PSI concrete. And let me tell you, when you start looking at 4,500 PSI concrete, the soils report and the engineer is cheaper. So it kind of directs them that way. We have very bad soil, so we deal with that. So the reinspection fee and all those different things, the ladders, she is telling you the god-awful truth. And I'll tell you, most of the things that, in fact, everything you discussed, it's an ongoing problem in every jurisdiction. So it's very hard. Like I said, we don't have reinspection fees. There's a lot. We don't even have sales tax or business license tax. So, there's a lot of revenue, and that revenue is not so much you're trying to gouge the public, it's to cover your time.
Excuse me, what jurisdiction is that you're
I
referencing?
would soon not tell you to do that right now. Calabasas. I'm a contract individual now, I'm retired, so I've worked various cities, I've worked for a couple of different companies. So I get to see a lot of different things and how they work, like working on uniformity is my big gig. I also teach at Ventura College, so
But there's a lot of different things that, one of my big things I've always said is I've always thought building officials should be able to go to their planning commission and council and tell them what they actually do, because most of them don't have a clue what we do. And the direction normally is, don't do that. So we don't. So, just getting up here tonight is just to kind of give you a sight from a building inspector and a building official. It's sometimes a problem, but you know what? It's used very seldom. Most contractors are very good. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And going, I just reference to Mr. Quillisi's comments. One of the reasons, my impetus for voting on it, carrying it to the next meeting, is we have one of our members absent, and at this point, he may have some input into it or not, but at least there's an opportunity. Yeah. So, okay, does anyone have anything else? Okay, I'm going to call this meeting adjourned at 7:47. Oh,
Not yet.
I just opened it up again.
I have the last word
I noticed.
before you adjourn, young man. The first thing I wanted to do is I just wanted to clarify real quick. You set your agenda for next meeting at the beginning of the meeting, and personally, I couldn't tell you what's on the agenda. So I'd like, if we can, to review that right now and let Renee read back to you what the board wants. That'd be the first thing, and then the second thing I'd like to do is see Renee send that to the chair, a copy of it when you write the new agenda up prior, and let the board chair here review and comment so that you two are on the same page. And as soon as you can get that to him, I think it will be beneficial for the chair to be able to comment and then request pertinent information so that it can get to this board in a timely manner. And I think if we did those three things, you guys really worked well tonight, and the give and take was excellent. And I think if we just move that to that next level and just have that exchange and that interaction, I think it's just going to make us all a better board. So that would be my comments. And nice job tonight.
Okay.
Do we need a motion to bring this back?
What is it that we decided to do?
We've continued virtually every item, with the exception of the consent items that we voted on, which was item 1, and we've carried forward consent item 2. There were some questions there. We've carried forward discussion item 4. We've carried forward discussion item 3, and we've added the 4 remaining City Council Building Appeals Board directives per the City Council meeting of 11 July. So I think the aggregate is there are 7 items.
Okay. I would like to just say that I really liked Mr. Quillisi's suggestion, and under normal circumstances, I think we should employ that. But since Mr. Daddy is not here tonight, I agree that we should give him a chance to put his 2 cents in.
It's not going to impair the building officials' fine-tuning, if you will, completion of the building, the respective code sections that are proposed to be amended, and we'll take a quick look at it. We should be able to vote on that and make a recommendation that can be carried forward to council at the subsequent council meeting. So I think we're good on that. I'm not aware of anything here that we need to have a motion or a second on. So shall I close the meeting again? All right. In that case, adjourned at 7:50.
When is the final map coming up? I don't see him on anything. When are we going to discuss it?
I have one. So that's why I have one.
sent to you guys. Yeah, it's on it. That's my wire because there is a big stick there. It is not always carried. Well, is it planning's responsibility to lead? Is it Bob's responsibility to lead? They're just looking. Oh, yes, you did. You got twice the right. The reality is, you know, we're kind of cool.
Yeah. Well, there's a continuing problem on the planning commission that aggravates me with every man, and that is, you don't have to get any conclusion. Besides the fact that most of the members don't read anything, which is, the planning commission is no longer responsible for everything the way it was 10 years ago. And that mindset is not.
No, I have to.
I'll check it out. Okay, all right, I just want to, okay.
And the members, either a John Merck who's been here forever, or the new ones that kind of come into the culture of we're responsible for everything, have yet to realize that Title IX in Maine belongs to this group and not to the planning commission.
I think Bob would agree on that. That's the fact. You know, why we.
He left yesterday. San Diego. They left. We were on the Thomas.
The guts of the agenda to talk about. This is as chair of your group. You need to read this stuff alone. And that person should actually be equal to the city attorney, so they should be telling you. You're not, that's not under your purview. You don't have
The city attorney tells us that it is.
Right, and trust me, Bill and I see that, we have a big problem. Well, this was a little more what?
Yeah, right. But, you know, when Matt Summers says you can put any conditions you want on a design review or whatever. Had some walls coming down.
Let's talk to Renee.
Polite talk actually going both directions over the wall. Good thing.
It is. Good night.
All of our codes. She's okay with that. So here's my only comment to you.
You're sure only?
Yeah, I think you did a great job tonight. Okay. But it's interesting because this is your field. Okay? And you have more expertise than the people that are thinking that are around you. But the reality of the chair is still to facilitate. So that would be my comment to you, would be to allow for more facilitation before you lead the discussion, because you have the most knowledge. It's easier for you. Again, you're the facilitator. Let them all speak, and then let the two people with here, Renee, just 1 second, if you can for a second, and then you go and I can go. I just wanted to say thank you. I thought the meeting went well, both of you.
Yeah.
And I really think that this, being able because you do write the agenda. You pretty much set the agenda through the city manager's office, who in turn sets it through the city council.
So my only concern, and like I said, I'm new at these meetings and these agendas and stuff.
Right.
So if we put an item on the agenda, it has to have an associated staff report and backup. And I don't know that I can, in reality, prepare staff reports for those other 4 items in a month.
City council items?
Yeah, in a month.
So,
I mean,
well,
the Title IX rewrite alone is gonna take me, I mean, in order for me to do this in a month, which my goal is to do this in a month, I have to have that done in 2 weeks.
well, sure, so you're trying to.
So I can get the, agenda, or I can get the item through the city attorney and everything, and get the agenda out in 2 weeks.
So this is,
So that's, because if.
I just want you,
right, if
I think you might be,
haven't-
well, I think you might be confused. And again, this would be for you two to work out interactively, would be, you being able to state exactly what you just said. And my response, if I was William, would say, I'm not looking for a complete packet on each one of those items. What I'd like to just make sure that they're agendized, so that we all know that they are on the future agenda. And then you two actually discuss what you feel you can get through on this, on your next meeting. That's what you two should be talking about. Whether you got 9 things on the agenda to me is irrelevant. You two need to agree, we think it's gonna take this much to do the first one, this much the second one, the third one, and have a ballpark. Because I agree, I wouldn't expect you to have available to these guys in 3 weeks a packet for each one of the council
So you
requests.
don't have to have a packet when you put it on the agenda?
Well, item number 4 got put on without a packet.
Right, because that doesn't, I mean, I didn't think it needed any
Well, see, so
backup.
there you go.
But
So,
these other ones I know need backup.
Well, they will.
The
So-
fire map and stuff, that
so
absolutely
you
needs
and
a staff
William,
report.
you and William need to work through that.
I think some of these items are gonna take 3 to 5 meetings.
I agree.
So let's go with what get you, all I wanted was agendizing the direction of council. And then
But see,
the
my
items,
misunderstanding is that you have to have a staff report when you agendize an item that
well,
needs a staff report.
you're supposed to, but if you're not, then then it can be continued, okay?
Or-
And still kept on the agenda.
Or supporting report to follow as needed.
No,
Well,
not as needed.
No, well, however you want
gotta
to
have some date certain.
No,
for us.
all that, and what I'm saying to that is, in other words, if you two agree that you're only gonna get to one of the 4 leftover agendized items, you two agree on what that is, and you get that to Bill as quick as you can, so that you can get the necessary information and have a packet.
Let's do the easy ones.
If you get through that packet,
My reason for wanting to do Title IX is I really want to get code amendments for this city, particularly like we're talking about the fire.
Right.
You know, I really, this city hasn't adopted code since what, 1998? You know, I really want to do that, but in order to do that, I have to rewrite Title IX.
Yeah, but we have direction from council, and let's put it this way.
But direction from council, there was no, just because the list, when I didn't understand that there was an order to that list, it was just a list.
No, there isn't an order, but the thing is, they do want to see some progress.
Right, so,
Okay,
I mean.
that's all I'm saying. Let's
we
do
got
the easy
this.
ones.
So
So-
I did,
so
like,
again-
the recommendations for the second unit compliance program was the easiest thing on that.
so to me, again, this is where, this is where you both have to recognize that what you both want is what's in the best interest of the community and the city. I hear you clearly stating that we have not done this process since what,
98.
Okay, that's imperative that we get that done. And I hear what William is saying is, and we also had some really concise direction from council that is important. So you two are, you know, we keep going back and forth, that's what I'm saying, there's gotta be some give and take here. I'm suggesting you write the agenda as you see it, send it to Bill, let Bill make his, William, let him make his comments. Do your exchange as two professional people, and then ultimately, we're going to cede the agenda to the building official. We just want input and say. That's all I'm hearing from the board, from Dab. But we recognize that, you know, what your responsibilities are. We understand that. We also understand who we report, who the board reports to. So just talk it through, send each other the emails, iron out, and I don't think there are differences, I think it's just a priority, or 1 or 2. But work with each other on that, and let the chair see it sooner than later. And I would probably copy Steve and copy me at this stage. And then we're gonna get some good things going here. Like I said, I really appreciated both of you tonight. You both have, and this is why I was telling William about facilitating. There's no one smarter in general contracting on this board than Bill. In fact, the board should probably be made up of more gentlemen and women like him, but we don't have that. So they have to learn and grow just like I have to learn and grow as a council person. There's a lot of shit I don't know. But we also have to recognize your experience, your strength, and your intelligence and what you bring to the table, and your vast experiences. So if we do that, we do it well, we're gonna serve the community better. That's my goal. So, Bill, if you ask for stuff, Wayne, if you ask for stuff, again, recognize what you're asking for and realize that there's gonna be a timeliness to a lot of this. And then that's the other thing that you need to be able to do is if you don't feel you have time, you need to be able to go to your supervisor and ask him how you get this done. Because ultimately, it's Steve who has to dictate whether you get additional staff or more hours or whatever it takes for you to do this job. And you can't be gun shy about it. You know, we were given these directions, I gotta have packets for these, and I'm gonna need some support. Now, he's either gonna tell you to get support within your company, or he's gonna say, let me give you someone to help you. But you gotta be able to go to him and feel totally comfortable in that, because you can't support this board unless you have the support you need to give them what they need.
And you know, I don't think there's an issue with bringing an item up on an agenda without a packet, saying packet to follow, and it still allows for some discussion about it, and maybe part of that discussion is going to be, what do we really need to be looking at?
Yes.
Yeah, and that will actually produce some framework perhaps for the packet. I think it actually will, and that's a kind of a collaborative process then, because that's what I'm saying. If we're looking at some of these taking 3 to 5 meetings, one of them might just be simply organizational. How we're going to approach this direction from council. What the heck did they mean?
Right. Well, you gotta remember what we watched, I remember what I tried doing, was we had stalled. And we needed to get this moving again.
Yeah.
And so it was, let's take it back to council for clarification, because there was some gray. And the gray was, you weren't here when VAB was created, and when VAB was first giving its duties.
Right.
So all you're getting is hearsay. Well, we think this is what they meant when they said it. It was easier, let's take it back, let's clarify, and let's
And
move
we've got a
on.
list now.
And you also have to, as the building official, have to recognize that this city has specific requirements that it has to meet. And if we haven't done things since 1998, my suggestion to you, get it done.
Well, and that's my priority.
And that's what I would do.
I mean, the other stuff on the list isn't my expertise. This is my expertise.
That's okay, though, you have to work through what isn't your expertise,
And
and
I
you've
will
got to,
let the
because you're gonna
experts
gain more
do that.
knowledge and insight. I don't think there's anyone here that's an expert on fire, but we can all recognize we're working off of outdated fire maps. And if it wasn't for members of this body actually engaging themselves outside of this body with the county fire officials, we wouldn't be where we are today in the discussion. So it's just important we all recognize there's a lot of things we don't know. But if we come together and say, we're gonna go get that information.
Well, yeah, I will go get the information,
Right.
but the code adoption, like I said, I know code adoption,
Great.
and that's what I
Then work
really
through it.
want this city to get these codes adopted.
And again, in your email to William, you might actually explain your thought process into how you're going to adopt them. And maybe once William understands how easy and fast this might be and recognizes, what your goal is, again, it's not, it doesn't become an argument, it just becomes a better understanding.
You know,
And
a good
then you
example
support
of
one another.
a problem right now is we have septic systems in this city where people are coming in for septic permits. There is no code unless it's specifically adopted that deals with septic permits. It's in an appendix in the plumbing code.
Well, no, isn't that a strict purview by county environmental health
Absolutely not.
within the margins of the city?
Nope. It's the building department, it's the local authority's responsibility to issue permits for septic systems. Ventura County Health washed their hands of those, I don't know how long ago.
Well, I just read something from the head of environmental health technical, his name's Matt something, technical services, which went to the general manager of the sanitary district, who said that they are looking at scrutinizing each and every, not only new permits, but existing permits because of contamination to the
Correct, you're supposed
And
to.
that was
I
also
I learned something a couple weeks ago. So what you do is you're supposed to get a permit from the city for the construction of the septic system or replacement. And you're supposed to get a permit from the county of Ventura for the discharge of the effluent into your seepage pits or leach lines.
Yeah.
I don't know any city that's doing that. I know Camarillo is not, we didn't know. There's a new
We
requirement
have
coming
different
down.
issues here, though, because of the aquifer.
Right, so there's new requirements coming down from the Regional Water Quality Control Board about septic systems. And they are going to put hundreds of thousands of dollars into Joe homeowner to monitoring and extra systems in their septic system.
Well, watch, here's your win.
So-
You're learning, but here's your win. You're learning this, and he sits on the sanitation district board. So,
No,
so
but
between,
this is from Ventura County Health. So down the road, and what I have requested from Ventura County Health is that it will probably be in the city's best interest, and I'm still working this out. The other cities are going to enter into an MOU with the county to provide the permitting and discharge system for septic systems. And the reason is the Regional Water Quality Control Board will give the county the responsibility for the monitoring of this, and then these individual property owners will not have to install these additional monitoring systems. And, oh, by the way, they won't have to go to LA to the Regional Water Quality Control Board to get their permits. So eventually, I believe it will go back to Ventura County Health. However, currently, I don't have any codes
Well, okay, well, wait a
inspect
minute,
these.
but there's another, you do have the codes of the sanitary district, which is if somebody's proposing to put in a septic system, the means of disposal of septic materials has to do with where it is in relationship to an existing sanitary sewer system.
Right, but the sizing of the system and all that stuff is not the sanitary district, doesn't have.
No, I'm saying if you're within the code, within the county is what, because it's in conformance with the sanitary district, if a property, not the situs of the structure, but the property line is within 300 feet of an existing sewer, no septic allowed, they have to connect.
Correct, but today, if you had an existing septic system that's not in any of those, it's just your existing septic system, and you wanted to do an addition to your house.
Expansion of the
you need
system.
Expansion of the system. We have no current codes in this city to plan, check, and enforce on the septic system, because all of the septic system regulations are in an appendix in the plumbing code, and those, the state doesn't adopt, the local jurisdiction has to adopt.
so this is what I would say. This to me, again.
So
is-
that's why code adoption for this city is.
Well, code adoption is very important, but also this is another aspect of that. That should be a specific part of the code that's brought to PAB, because this is the venue where the public gets to hear the discussion. If you're just making rules based on what other communities are doing, this
Well,
community.
the MOU thing would certainly be.
Right, but this community really gets their panties in a bunch over that. It needs to be brought out, it needs to be openly discussed, and then it needs to be a recommendation from this body and you to council.
And that's what we just.
And that's how I would approach that, because there's a lot of that knowledge that needs to be disseminated to the community versus a little here or a little there, or I heard this, or I heard that, or I went to the sanitation district and that's not their take.
Yeah, what people have been doing is they've been coming in with the county standards for septic system sizing, and actually the plumbing code is less restrictive.
And well, here's something else too. This to me just reminds me of the weed abatement. Everyone
I
thinks it's a county issue, and the reality is it comes back and it was a city and county issue.
Yeah, both joint.
Well, and the fact that for how many years was everyone under the assumption that it was a county responsibility? Until it was confronted and they went, no. So that's something that comes out. That's the daylight that's shed.
I do have to say though, again, I believe that 300 feet also applies to expansions. Because the biggest issue that's going to happen here, and this is the direction of the county environmental health and the state water quality, is they say goodbye to septics. because they contaminate the aquifer. There's absolutely no way that they don't. The question is how much.
Right.
Having built.
Well, that's what she's saying.
Having built 23
You've got to
sand
monitor, you've got to
filters
monitor
on the top of,
Yeah.
You've got to
Santa
monitor
Rosa
it. That's how they're
Valley.
gonna find out how much
Yeah.
you're contaminating. You know what that's
No,
gonna
but
cost?
you don't know. It's
Yeah,
not
it's
even,
gonna
it's,
cost an
yeah.
incredible amount.
Exactly.
Or your option
Or
is
if-
connect.
Connect.
And that's
Or,
an
no, well,
incredible
there's another
amount.
one, you can have your own on-site system, but it has to be recertified every year, and it's gonna cost you $80,000 to put it in the first place.
Right.
But you know how that entire conversation that I just referenced, there was an email conversation between the County Environmental Health and the GM at the Sanitary District? It's because of a comment here at a planning commission by one of the planning commissioners regarding an incinerator. And
Oh,
also a
the-
query regarding
the
composting
composting
toilets.
toilets.
Right.
Well, no, yeah.
I was at
Okay.
that meeting.
Well, okay. Okay, yeah, well, the
I think we all
environmental
agree on
health guy
on
was
composting toilets.
was expressing some surprise at that coming up, and he said, you guys wanna talk about it? There's all the information there, it's the same thing, composting versus a standard septic system, it still contaminates the aquifer. He said, as far as incinerating, he said,
Nice try.
don't get me started. I'm out of that. That's the air quality, guys. And you know what